This is episode 92 of the Gruler Nation podcast. My name is Robert Gruler, joined today by Kim Benjamin, who is a trial lawyer. She's the founder of Missouri DWI and Criminal Law Center at the Benjamin Law Firm in Kansas City, metropolitan area. She's got a lot of experience, and she's kind of my kindred spirit. We've got a lot in common. We're both criminal defense attorneys, but she's got a little bit more experience than I do. She's done 70 jury trials, 200 bench trials, in both criminal and civil matters. She's got an outstanding win record. She is a faculty member, or was a faculty member, at the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College. I know she does a lot of work with the National College for DUI Defense. She's been awarded the Missouri Lawyers Weekly Women Justice Award for Litigation and the Missouri Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers Association Lawyers Atticus Finch Award. So a lot of accomplishments there. And I want to welcome you to the show. Thanks for being here, Kim.
Thank you for having me.
So, we were speaking a little bit offline before we hopped on the show. I know a lot about what you do because it's very similar to what we do. But my area of focus where I wanted to start was sort of the origin story. How did you get into this space? Because a criminal lawyer who does jury trials is not necessarily what kids want to be when they grow up. They want to be an astronaut or go to the moon or be president or something like that. So walk us through kind of the story of how you evolved into where you are today.
Well, my parents would probably say I was meant to be a lawyer because I was a very stubborn, argumentative child.
Sure.
And that's really probably what pushed me more into law than anything, was them saying, you need to be a lawyer. I heard that a lot as a child. My parents, neither one of them had a college education, but they knew they wanted to raise kids that went on to college. Yeah. So reading was huge in my family. I remember I was reading at a very young age, and my parents, like I said, I argued a lot. I was a very bossy child, apparently.
Yeah.
And so when I went to college, law was not on my mind at all. But ultimately graduated from college and wasn't really interested in finding a job just yet.
Yeah.
So I took the LSAT.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't going to be medical school. My graduate school didn't even sound interesting to me because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, I'm 22 years old, and one of my favorite shows at the time was LA Law. That's way back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was one of my favorite shows. And I remember, and speech communication was a part of my college education.
Right.
So it just felt natural. Political science was too, but I was not interested in politics.
That was your undergrad?
Mm-hmm.
Political
Yes.
science?
Political science, and then speech communication. I had 2 bachelor's degrees. So 5 years of college, not really wanting to go into the real world yet, went to law school.
Yeah.
And I'm from Kansas City area, went off to law school in Washington, D.C., and came back and became a public defender.
Okay.
Because what happened to me in law school actually is I wanted to be in the corporate world. That interested me. Being like on Wall Street or in a corporation, that sounded good to me. My background was my parents had no college education, but they also were blue-collar workers. So I didn't really know what corporate America meant, really. But anyway, I was in a class for trial advocacy, and the professor said, you need to not be in a law office transactional type of lawyer.
Yeah.
You need to be in the courtroom. And that was the push that I needed. Okay. So I came back home to Kansas City. I applied for the public defender's office and got in, and that was the beginning of me being a trial lawyer.
Was that public defense? Was that just because you could easily have been a prosecutor?
Yes, and for me, I could have easily been a prosecutor because I didn't have any sort of mindset for either side at the time.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be in the courtroom because the professor told me I needed to be. Criminal sounded interesting to me. They're going to be in the courtroom faster than most other lawyers in any other type of law. And I actually did apply at the prosecutor's office and the public defender's office. The public defender's office hired me. And it was then, within about 6 months, I realized I could never be a prosecutor. Yeah. Because I certainly wasn't a silver spoon child. I was raised, military father, 21 years. When he retired, and then he worked in a factory. Very middle class, suburban, small town upbringing outside of Kansas City. And I had no clue that people could be in prison wrongfully.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of like who's in prison, who should be, because it seems like every other case is a wrongful conviction or a false confession, or somebody lied to get somebody else in trouble and put them in prison. And that, I just never had a clue. I did not know that the police could lie to you. We now know that.
Right.
The police can lie to you to get you to confess.
Yeah.
I didn't know the prosecutors could cheat and hide the ball, which isn't, thankfully, the norm where I'm at, but it happens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I was naive.
So was I. My story is very similar to that. You know, I went through law school wanting to be a prosecutor.
Yep.
I actually thought, I was a political science just like you were. And I thought, I'll go work at the prosecutor's office, work my way up the chain of command and run for office one day.
Yeah.
And much like your story, I went and worked at a defense law firm because the prosecutor's office wouldn't take me when I was an intern. I was an intern there during my early year in law school. They didn't want me. I was too young. I didn't know anything. And just like you, I started to have to deal with prosecutors. And I was like, I could never do that.
No.
So you practice in Missouri, and
Yes.
you start there at the public defender's office. How long are you there before you decide it's time for the next chapter?
I was at the Kansas City Public Defender's Office, so dealing with a lot of inner city type of cases for about a year. And then I went to a suburban office where I had a different type of clientele, a lot of meth back then. Missouri it was very bad back then. It still is, but that was a lot of my cases because I left the city. The city had a different kind of clientele. Leave the city, and then I get a lot of drugs. And then I was promoted actually to be a manager at even further away. I was at the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri, central Missouri. And
is that where that Netflix show?
yes, that's
really?
right. The Jason Bateman show on Netflix.
Okay.
It's in Ozark.
All right.
That's right.
Yeah.
But did that for just shy of 6 years.
Okay.
Got a ton of jury trial experience, all different kinds of cases, drugs, murder, criminal non-support, burglary, you name it. I did all of it. And not a lot of DWI work. That really came into my life after I left the public defender's office. But did that for just shy of 6 years. And then it was that burnout moment.
Right.
Where I'm spinning my wheels because there's not a lot of money in public defense, not just for the lawyers, but just in general.
Right.
So you have way too many cases. Your clients don't get the attention that they need of their lawyers. And most public defenders struggle with the stress of that.
Yeah.
And having more cases than they can possibly handle, working nights and weekends all the time.
Right.
And there's no such thing as a real vacation.
Right.
So about just shy of 6 years before I went out on my own. And I did that back in my hometown by Kansas City.
Yeah, and I have a ton of respect for public defenders and
Me too.
and people who do that. A lot of attorneys like to kind of dump on them, like, well, they don't care as much as we care, and they're not good lawyers because they're just government employees and stuff. And I couldn't disagree with that more. I mean, I know a lot of people here locally who are excellent they're defense lawyers. They just happen to work for the government.
Every really good lawyer who I respect in Missouri, 90% of them or 99% of them are former public defenders because that's where they got into the courtroom, learning the trade, learning how to be a trial lawyer. It's not for everybody. There's plenty of people that do go into public defender work that shouldn't be there, and that does happen as in any profession.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they're the best lawyers, and they certainly have the best training. In Missouri, it's a little different than every state's so different. In Missouri, it's a state agency.
Okay.
So, like the prosecutors are all county government, the public defenders state government, state agency, and so they put a lot of time and effort into training and doing the best they can to work with the budget that they have because they get a state budget through the legislature.
Yeah.
And it's the bottom of the barrel nationwide. Missouri's made national news for how bad it is, actually. But you do the best with what you got, and their training program was amazing.
In terms of, you said bottom, in terms of funding?
Funding, yeah. And having more cases than public defenders should carry. It's against the American Bar Association's guidelines, actually. So we were living in a world of chronically being in a malpractice situation, for example, or an ethical violation, because we had too many cases.
What kind of numbers?
I don't know what it is today,
Yeah.
but it's quite public. The Missouri public defender is quite public with how bad their numbers are.
Yeah, that's a bummer, you know, and it's one of those things, and I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. You know, defense lawyers, in my experience, have gotten a lot of kind of negative stigma from the rest of society. You know, how can you represent these people? They're criminals, they're scum, they deserve to be in there. And my experience has been that, quite frankly, most of our clients are extremely good people. You know, 99.9% of them are very good people. They just had one bad night, one bad argument, one bad, you know, trip to the bar, whatever it is. But they're good people. They're fathers, they're mothers, they're, you know, they've got employees, they're teachers. You know, we've represented, you know, airline pilots and firefighters and all sorts of things.
Yep.
And so for people who are being charged with a crime, you know, they need help, and a lot of them just simply do not have the resources to go help somebody.
Yes.
So you know, people who are doing the defense work, they're helping people who are sort of completely out of options. I mean, they have nothing, they have no alternatives. So in terms of like a hierarchy, you know, they're at the bottom of that. And has that been kind of your experience?
My experience, definitely that question that you started with of how can you represent those people. I haven't heard that question in a long time, and I think it's because of social media and the media in general actually turning a light on the corruption that exists in the criminal justice system and how poor people, and particularly minorities, and if you're the combination of poor and a minority, how you are presumed guilty way faster by law enforcement, the public, the police, the prosecutors, the judges, everybody. And so I think I don't get that question as much anymore. And frankly, it's easier to represent someone who's guilty.
Yeah.
The stress of representing someone who's innocent or someone who feels being railroaded, that stress is so much bigger. It's easy to sleep at night when you're representing guilty people because you're doing the best you can for a broken person potentially, or a person who maybe hurt someone else. But children were not born into this world to become criminals. They're made.
Right.
And they're usually made by some abuse in the system that did not, and no one protected them, whether it be a teacher, a parent, the police. Somehow we as a society failed them. And we put all these things in place to try to prevent that, but it happens. And then you have, on top of it, the trauma that leads to substance abuse. If it wasn't for substance abuse and mental health issues, 90% of my practice would be gone.
Right.
Because there's so much substance abuse and mental health issues in this country, and we don't have enough resources. The Department of Mental Health in Missouri, for example, their funding is horrific. It's as bad, if not worse, than the public defender for helping those people in stress and in trouble. And so what happens is crimes.
Right.
I'll never forget the time I had a schizophrenic client who broke into a house to take a bath and eat.
Wow.
That was a felony. He went to prison for that.
Yeah.
That's the way things are, unfortunately. We don't take care of those who are lesser than us, and then when they do something to try to survive, which is the instinct we all have, then they get punished for it. Yeah,
and exactly. And you use the word punish, you know, and you mentioned substance abuse and mental problems, and there's a phrase from a guy, I'm a part of his group, that he says you can't punish the pain out of people, you know, and people are oftentimes using substances because they're hurting. They've got trauma from their upbringing. They've got abuse that they're dealing with, and so now they're turning to other mechanisms to help them dull that pain.
Right.
And then now they get in trouble, and now our solution is, well, we're just going to send you to jail. We're going to send you to prison, even though that doesn't do anything to help that person, and it doesn't address the underlying problem.
That's exactly right. We have a good movement throughout the country for things like drug court, mental health court, veterans court, but it's not enough. What we do to our veterans and how we give them very little support is horrendous. The suicide rate among veterans is horrendous. And frankly, when you see mental illness and you see what we see in our profession, it's just sickening that we don't help these people before they commit a crime.
Right.
When you look at violent crimes and property crimes, almost all of them are from people that are broken and somehow broken by us not helping them along the way. Like we caused their trauma or we didn't prevent their trauma in some way, especially the veterans. That's just on us as a country.
Completely. Yeah. You mentioned previously that there was kind of a shift in the public perception of what's going on in the criminal justice system. And I was going to ask you about that, and you brought it up. And I was curious, you said you think that a lot of it has to do with social media. Can you expand on that? Do you think it's just the fact that phones are everywhere and people are recording more?
There's that for sure. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times when I'm in a jury trial, I'm going to talk to the jury about things they've seen on Facebook. 20 years ago, I remember I had a sex case where I couldn't ask those kinds of questions, but there was one famous case, the McMartin trial out of LA, where a daycare center was maligned and destroyed by the social workers who thought they knew how to diagnose child molestation among children with toys and play games and just this horrific stuff that psychologists, very good psychologists today, are embarrassed by. There's some still what I call crackpots out there that think that's all legit. But I remember talking to a jury about the McMartin trial, and now it's like, well, let's talk about what you've seen on Facebook. Let's talk about the videos you've seen, whether it be, it stands out in my mind that there was an African-American couple on I don't remember who was holding the camera, but I think it was the woman. I think she was driving, and she videoed the police shooting and killing her husband in the passenger seat. That's just, I've seen so many videos on Facebook alone and other places like that it's hard. You almost become numb to it because it seems to be commonplace. What I'm also loving are the investigative journalists, whether it be 48 Hours that helped Ryan Ferguson in Missouri, who was wrongfully convicted, the Making a Murderer documentary, the name of the not docuseries, it's a mini-series essentially on Netflix about the poor young men in the Central Park Five or the Harlem Five, I think they were called, the young boys that were just treated horrifically. I am so grateful that there's that programming out there and that there's people out there shedding a light on what's happening. And I just want the public to know that you think it's rare, you think it doesn't happen, it happens. And it does happen in white suburbia, and it does happen in your small town when it's not just happening in New York City to young boys in Harlem. It's happening all over. Look at the Memphis 3 down in, I think it's technically Arkansas, but the 3 young boys that were wrongfully convicted because the young boy, I remember the lead defendant, his name was Damien. He changed his name to Damien, and they called them, the 3 boys, devil worshippers. And that was the furthest from the truth of what was going on in those boys' lives. The tragedy is if people want you or if they don't like you or you're somehow marginalized in society, you are a target.
Yeah.
And that's what's sad. And thankfully, social media and everybody having a cell phone and just people having a voice. It's not just us hoping that the local journalist in the newspaper is writing an article on something. We have just people, everyday people who are exposing corruption through the use of their cell phone. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think it's a great trend, and I've thought a lot about it. I'm trying to diagnose, why, because it feels sort of like a spring. Like this kind of has just started coming out maybe in the last decade. We've got movements like Black Lives Matter. We're starting to see, like you said, journalists actually cover these things. People are interested in it. So it's not just that, there's a platform like Facebook to post it, but people are rallying around these movements and these causes because of the injustices that they're seeing.
The other thing that I wish there would be more of is I wish that police officers who, and they talk about the blue line, I think it's called.
Or the blue shield.
The blue shield.
Yeah.
Where there are good police officers out there. This is not all police officers are bad. There are good prosecutors. There are good defense attorneys. There are actually bad criminal defense attorneys.
I know a lot of them, yeah.
So it's human beings across the board. And how do we make people accountable to each other and not let people hurt each other? And there are people who are hurting others in all professions, whether it be judges, prosecutors, criminal defense lawyers, the police. But there's also good ones out there too.
Sure.
And to empower the police to be able to say, not on my watch, not in my precinct, not in my agency, to speak out, to whistleblow when they see something wrong. I've actually had police officers approach me and ask for help before, and they had recordings to give me for help. They didn't know what to do. Some quit, some say, I'm done, I'm going to become a truck driver, because the stress is so high. They're not paid very much.
No.
And unfortunately in America, not only are they not paid very much, they have an extremely highly stressful job.
Yeah.
And like any given day, they can get killed.
Right.
I don't leave my house every day thinking, today I could die. I don't have family thinking, today my loved one might not come home. They do.
Yeah.
And they don't get enough mental health counseling and treatment for that. They don't get enough training for that. And they certainly don't get enough pay for that. And I wish there was a way that we as a society could empower them, educate them, train them, and build them up rather than constantly just tearing them down.
Yeah. I mean, you're very diplomatic about that, but
there are bad ones out there too.
There are bad ones. Yeah.
I've come across them. I've gotten a few of them fired. I've actually had a jury trial where I told the jury in voir dire, this is really hard for me to say, but during this trial, I'm going to be calling this officer a liar.
Yeah.
How are we going to deal with that? Because it's hard for me to say. It might be hard for you to hear. But this officer, that's what I'm going to be doing in this trial. And he did not stay an officer after that 15-minute not guilty.
That's great. Yeah. Well, it's great. And that's what people don't realize, society kind of in general. And even before I got into this space, you look at officers just like you do, veterans and doctors and things, these people who are out there sacrificing their life to be these heroes.
We were raised to trust and love them and believe we are safe when we're with them.
Right. Just call the police. They're going to come and make everything
better. When I say we, I don't mean we as Americans, because I don't believe that a young African American raised in any city and maybe even in the suburbs is raised that way. And that's sad. Yeah. But it's for good reason. If I was an African American parent, I would be absolutely cautioning my children.
Right. And I agree with that. And I'm not the first person to shout, race when something bad happens.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that, it's kind of a like gallows humor and kind of, jokey around the office that there are certain officers that we know if somebody got arrested, you could probably take a pick at what color that person was.
Yes.
And you're going to know that it's not a white guy, or it's not a young blonde, white ASU girl. It's somebody.
That's right.
It's somebody who's not in that category, and it's just one after the other. And so, my question to you is, you were saying that you want some more resources for these people, more mental health, more awareness, more support. But what's the answer? I mean, to me, it kind of sounds like it's a cultural problem that exists all throughout law enforcement. This blue shield, this idea that if one cop screws something up, the rest of them are going to cover for him. So how do we change that? Can you solve our criminal justice problems right now on the podcast? Please?
Right now, let's do it.
Please, can you do that?
What's interesting is in our legal profession, and I think the medical profession has this too, every state is different. Right? Every state has a different bar license, different rules, different ethical rules, different statutes. However, nationwide, they have some rules that are the same. And one of those rules is we're required to turn each other in. If we see another lawyer do something unethical, we are required to turn them in. If we see a judge, prosecutor, anybody do something unethical, we're required to turn them in, or we could get in trouble. And I think the medical profession is the same. However, it doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And that's because we're human beings and we don't want to snitch out someone, or we don't want to be the person who snitched someone out unless it was really, really bad. Or 9 times out of 10, you want to help the person as opposed to just snitch them out and get them into trouble if you know them and like them. If you don't know them and don't like them, you might not care. But we don't have a good system in place, I don't think, for the police to feel safe to whistleblow.
Yeah.
I don't think we certainly don't have a nationwide rule that allows them all to live under the same safety or the same kind of ethical rule like we as doctors or the legal profession might have. Even though every state's different, there's certain rules that are the same across the country.
Sure.
And I don't think they have that. And so when you have, 2,000 police agencies, sheriff's departments, highway patrols, all across this country, 2,000 or more probably. I don't even know the number. It's outrageous. Right. And they all have their own set of rules, and they all have their own set of policies and procedures. and they all have their own training manuals.
Right.
It's really hard to make things consistent. I don't know, because it's kind of like anything, just one person at a time.
Yeah.
We've seen if you look back over 30 years, you can see change. Some for the better, some not for the better. But you can see change when you look back over time. And for the most part, the only thing I can think of that's really changed monumentally is just the fact that we have the internet. Everyone has a computer in their pocket. Everyone's an investigative journalist at that point.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of the big things that cause change. But other than that, I'm surprised I see a police officer ever on video doing anything stupid, and I still see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
you'd think they know better by now.
You would, and they don't. And I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's there's in Arizona, a lot of the police departments are unionized, so they act sort of as that sort of bunker mentality. They're all going to protect each other, and we've got one organization here that they have a Facebook page, and they are just always trying to dunk on people, and I mean it's really inappropriate sort of us versus them mentality. And if that exists throughout the entire organization, it's really difficult. And good officers who are squeaking out, like you said, they leave. Mm-hmm. They say, this is inappropriate. I can't do anything here, so I'm going to go be a truck driver. So it's really hard to change an organization when you have the good people abandoning ship.
It's leadership starts from the top, right?
Yeah.
And if you have a bad apple at the top, it's going to be really hard for anyone to exist other than people who are willing to work that way.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and it's not one that I think is solvable overnight, but it is, I think, trending in the right direction. And we may be right in the midst of that change. We may be seeing the public demanding some more accountability, some more transparency, maybe more oversight.
Well, it's like anything. You said earlier, you don't punish the pain out of people. People make mistakes.
Yeah.
If you can create an environment that doesn't throw the book at people, even officers who make mistakes, if it was easier for an officer to make a mistake and say, you know what, I shouldn't have done that, I am sorry. How can I make amends? And then allow that process to work.
Right.
The making amends, the things we talk about in, the AA world, the NA world, the things you talk about in a good church upbringing, you learn about apologizing, confronting the person you hurt, and in a positive way, not confronting in a negative way, and making amends. And that, unfortunately, that the older we get, we realize you can't just say you're sorry and make amends, because someone's going to punish you the minute you make an admission to anything.
Right.
Punishment, unfortunately, is the rule if you have a whole bunch of prosecutors or statutes that don't allow people to do the restorative justice. There is a movement in this country, but it's very slow moving, for restorative justice.
Very slow.
And it's the ability for people to get together and say, you hurt me, and that person to say, I'm sorry, and to help you get better. It's like going back to the old days. When your kid stole something, you made them go back in the store, turn it in, apologize, and ask the owner if you're allowed to come back, right? That's what good parenting was. And you can't even do that anymore, because your kid's going to get arrested and sent to juvie for you being a good parent. And a lot of parents don't do that anymore. They won't take their kid back.
Right.
They don't trust.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, when I start thinking about all of the different moving parts, as you were speaking there, I was thinking about, you've got the unions, you've got the culture in law enforcement agencies, you've got, certain leaders who have political ambitions. So it's not even about justice anymore. It's about, this is a stepping stone into, a governor or a senator or something, and they got to play that tough on crime mentality. You've got, grants from the federal government, from the governor's office, who are, going to police departments, go get more DUIs. You have to go get more of these things. So you've got, kind of, quote, quotas that aren't really quotas, but they kind of are. It's a big money making entity. You've got all sorts of financial incentives.
Oh, the money making for the private,
the private prisons and jails and all.
I think they're outlawed in California now, which they should be outlawed across the country.
Yeah.
All it does is causes everybody to be locked up for a lot longer.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know much about that issue.
I don't even know how the tough on crime political slogan sells anymore, because it's not tough on crime. It's tough on poor people
Yeah.
and tough on minorities. That's
Right.
what the truth of that statement is. So any
Right.
politician who voices that statement is immediately, in my mind, not someone I'm going to want to support,
Right.
because it's not legit. You're creating laws that you and your little buddies at the country club, those laws don't apply to you.
Yeah.
You're just creating laws that apply to the poor people or
Yeah.
the minorities. And it's just disgusting, actually.
Yeah. It's like covert racism.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's complicated, but like you said, I think it is trending in the right direction. I do appreciate social media. Have you ever had the experience where, body cameras or cell phone video completely exonerates your client?
Not just once.
Yeah, I know.
Let's just put it that way. It's become so commonplace. Law enforcement pushed and did not want video cameras, and some agencies quit doing them and then had to go back to them. And
we still have some agencies in Arizona who do not have them.
We do too in Missouri.
They refuse to put them in their cars.
They claim it's
dash
about
cams.
money, and that's not the truth.
Right.
The truth of the matter is, if I'm a good police officer, that camera protects me, because I've also represented the police officer who's accused of a crime by someone they come into contact with in the public. And guess what could save their butt? That body cam.
Right.
And sometimes the body cam does work to our favor as a criminal defense lawyer. But if I'm a good cop, I'm not afraid of cameras. Just like I'm not afraid of cameras on me most of my time in my life, other than your private moments where you don't want any camera on you.
Right.
Why would I be afraid of a camera? Because I have something to hide. So that is just awful to me. And I think that the public, more and more, when I go to jury trial, they expect video. And in fact, that's how that one case where the officer didn't last very long and 15-minute not guilty, it was because he had dash cam video that it didn't totally disappear. Just the part of it where my client said something had happened conveniently disappeared.
Yeah, we've had cases too. We're diving into it. I talked to you a little bit about what's going on out of Scottsdale and basically the government not giving exculpatory evidence over to us. But what we're seeing is they will give us body cameras, but they're clipped weird.
Really?
Yeah, they're clipped. So they'll and for a while this was a problem out of Scottsdale. Like we would get like 10 or 11 clips from one DUI traffic stop. So in other words, the officer was just turning his camera on and off a bunch of times.
There are, yeah.
They turn them on. Oh, well, why'd you turn it off? Well, we went back to my car and I was doing notes and I took a phone call which didn't relate to the case, so I turned the camera off. You're like, wait a minute. What's going on
That's
with
what you're
this?
saying.
That's
but
what you're saying.
You're looking a little suspicious, dude.
Yeah.
I'd rather your personal phone call be on that and we all get to listen to it and know that you're legit. A good cop should not be doing that.
Yeah.
He's hurting his own credibility. If I were a judge or a prosecutor, I'd be like, no, don't do that. Even if you are innocent and didn't do anything wrong, it just looks bad.
Right.
Don't do that.
So when you're practicing in Missouri, are prosecutors proactively looking at these things, or is this something that the defense looks at and has to go bring to their attention? Like, are they watching body cameras there?
No.
No.
Most prosecutors get a packet, and it's paper, and it has a probable cause statement, which means it says like 2 or 3 pages of an affidavit signed by an officer of these are the facts that I've gathered. These are the crimes I think I've seen.
Yeah.
Or, not seen, but gather the evidence for.
Yeah.
And so that packet might be many, many pages with some videos underneath it, but they're not reviewing all of it before they file it. I have prosecutors that file drug charges before the testing comes back.
Yeah.
Guess what? Sometimes it wasn't a drug.
Right.
And you've been arrested and in jail and your life ruined and
Yeah,
you lost your job.
Car impounded, the whole thing.
The whole thing for something that wasn't even a drug. And now in the day of medicinal marijuana and then marijuana in some states legal and you got your CBD oil and cops, there's so much stuff out there that isn't even illegal. It's sad, but that prosecutor's just reading the 2 or 3 pages they have in front of them
Yep.
and filing charges and then letting it all sort out. Maybe in the 60s and 70s that didn't destroy lives, but in the day of the internet,
Yeah.
where everything's public record, and when your client says, "Can you keep this off my record?" Well, I can't keep everything off the internet. No.
Right. Well, we do mugshots here. So if you get arrested by the Maricopa County sheriff's office or any DPS agent, you go down to the 4th Avenue jail, they take your mugshot, and that goes on the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office website almost immediately.
Wow.
So regardless of whether you're innocent or guilty or whether you did it or not, your mugshot's going to be there.
And people are going to talk, and you're going to lose your job.
And we have all of these private, third-party mugshot websites who come and scrape the data off of our government website, and then they put them on their website, and they say, if you want to remove it, it's $350. And then they own,
that's extortion.
They own 30 of them. So it's a cat and mouse game. You're just trying to go, find where your next mugshot is. And this is happening to innocent people all over the place.
All over the place. And the job background checks that pull up very wrong information from these companies that are unaccountable. They're not accountable to anybody. They can publish all this bad information the employer bought for $35 off the internet. I tell my clients all the time, there's a lot of agencies out there. They're probably not even in this country, and we can't stop them from publishing. We can't stop all of them.
Yeah.
One at a time. You don't get a job, great. Now I can send that person a letter. Guess how? What? You're losing money because you didn't get a job. Your family's suffering because you didn't get a job because of this lie. And that's one lie. There's dozens of them out there. And then you have to spend the money to hire an attorney to send them a letter and hope that they'll stop publishing this bad information. The internet it's got good things and it's got bad things.
It does. It does. Yeah. The mugshot thing is especially disgusting. Arizona passed a law that says that they got to remove them or they face high fines, but there's still some companies. There's one in Florida that refuses to remove them. So you got to go sue them.
And that is expensive.
It's expensive. People don't have the resources to do it. Damage is basically already done. It's already on the internet. Once it's on the internet, it's permanent there. Somebody's got it somewhere. So, yeah.
The only thing the legislature could do, in my opinion, is make all arrests and everything not public.
Yeah.
Everything has to not be public until a certain point. A
Yeah.
conviction would be nice, or at least a probable cause hearing, at least a certain point in the process.
Yeah.
Because there are plenty of people who are arrested that is not a legit arrest.
Right.
It happens all the time.
Happens all the time. Yeah, we were just talking about that. It's funny. I was at the gym this morning, and I was talking to a guy, and I forget how we got started on this topic. My gym conversation should be 30 seconds. This one turned into like 15 minutes. But we were talking about we're hiring lawyers here, and he said, "Wow, you guys are that busy. Are people still getting DUIs?" And I said, "Yeah, they're still getting DUIs." And he said, "Well,
in the day of Lyft and Uber,
that's insane." Is what he's saying. How is that possible? And I said, well, look, a lot of these people, they've got alcohol problems, they've got drug problems. They think, that they're 5 minutes from their home, and they're not. And, so I'm not excusing it, but I'm trying to explain why this stuff is happening.
There's that group of people, but then there's also the machines malfunctioning and you were not intoxicated. The officer wanted you for another reason and you were not intoxicated. The blood test, I have a lot of blood test cases, and I don't even trust the blood test now that I know the science behind why you can't trust the blood tests and how they can be contaminated and fermentation can occur after a blood draw. Oh my gosh. I mean, there are people, there's all of that. And then there's this whole group of people, and I like to call them like the soccer moms and the country club crowds, that think that I feel okay.
Right.
There's a lot of people who say this. I shouldn't stereotype it. There are a lot of people who think I'm fine to drive because they feel fine.
Right.
Well, how you feel doesn't matter. If your state has a statute that says it's a per se crime at 0.08, because 0.08 is 4 bottles of beer, 4 Bud Lights, right? It's nothing.
If you're a bigger person, right? I mean, if you're a smaller person, and you don't drink much, and
the human body is so different, and everybody's tolerance is different.
Right.
Everybody's metabolism rate is so different. Yeah, there's averages and there's norms, but you don't have to feel alcohol at 0.08. Some people don't.
Right.
Some people feel alcohol at 0.04. Some people don't feel it until they're well above a 1.5.
Right.
And so the number 0.08 is meaningless. It just is meaningless. And so when people say, I felt fine, I was fine to drive, I don't care how you feel. And I tell people all the time, you can spend $5,000 to $10,000 for a DWI problem or an arrest, car towed, needing a lawyer, lots of classes, potentially lose your license. Let's just talk about the plethora of problems.
Yeah.
Or you can pay an Uber driver $30 to get you home.
Right.
And you have to go back and get your car. Okay, another $30. Or a friend has to get you back to your car. Pick one.
Yeah.
But not everybody thinks that way. And in the moment, and we've all been in that moment, anybody who's ever drank has been in that moment where they have to make a judgment call.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to know your body, and you have to know how much you've drank. And sometimes you don't know how much you've drank.
Right. Well, and that's the whole point of alcohol, is to impair your judgment, right?
Right.
I mean, that's why you do it. So you can you can drink and you can say things you probably ordinarily wouldn't say, but it's okay because he's saying things that he wouldn't ordinarily say, and you're just kind of, it's fun. It's to loosen you up. And so then you say, well, now it's time to make a critical decision. Do I drive or do I Uber home? And your ability to make that decision is impaired.
I have a client who went to a bar as a sober driver, and to him that meant, I'm just going to have a couple, and he did just have a couple. Well, 3 beers, I think it was, maybe 4 through the evening, which was a 6-hour evening. And ultimately, when he's driving the very drunk person home, he gets pulled over. And he was being the good guy. It was the drunk person at the bar who'd driven and was trying to drive home. He grabbed her keys. He said, we're going to get you home. He was with another buddy who'd been with him, and they're going to help this girl get home. And he, the Good Samaritan, got pulled over, and it was a .081.
Yeah.
A .081 for anybody who knows alcohol and how the body absorbs alcohol, and anybody who knows how these machines are off, not just a little, but a lot often. And anybody who knows that the amount of time that passed and the number of beers, this man was not intoxicated.
Yeah.
And that was his arrest, his cost, his life. So sometimes you can truly not be intoxicated, but if the machine says you are, done deal. And if the officer smells beer, I tell people all the time, beer in particular, if the officer walks up to your car and smells beer, you're done. You might as well just no. Very few people get out of it. I've had 4 phone calls in the middle of the night. All of them, I ask very detailed questions. All of them I've advised to actually blow.
Into the PBT?
I beat all 4 of those cases.
Yeah.
But 2 of the people didn't listen to me and refused. I still beat those 2 cases. One of them blew under a .08.
You're talking about the portable breath test?
No,
You're
the one
talking
at
about
the
the
station.
intox.
In
Okay.
Missouri, they have a right to call a lawyer. They have a 20-minute window of opportunity, and all 4 of these people were friends of mine with my cell phone number who woke me up.
Yeah. Those are fun calls. I've had
Those are
calls.
fun calls.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes,
If I'm groggy or if I've been drinking, they're in trouble.
yeah. And they're drinking too, and you've got somebody being woken up at 2 a.m. I've had several of those calls.
Yes.
Okay, so they don't have to take the portable breath test on the side of the road.
In Missouri, there is a portable breath test on the side of the road, the preliminary breath test they call it, and they don't have to take it. They don't have to take any test. They could literally say, officer, am I free to go home? No, you're not. Okay, then what's next? I'm not doing any tests. They could literally be done at that moment.
No walk and turns, one leg
They
stands.
can refuse all of that.
Yeah.
And
no consequences for their license.
There's always consequences for every choice we make. And in Missouri, the consequence is most cops are going to arrest you anyway because they're just going to not know what to do with you. And you just shut down they have a protocol and they're supposed to follow it, and they don't know what to do next, so they arrest you. Then you have, but you can refuse the preliminary breath test without consequence. But obviously, anytime you refuse something, depending on where you are, certain judges are going to let that evidence in as maybe consciousness of guilt, or, you get to explain to the jury why you refuse these tests, right?
Yeah.
So it's not always with no consequence.
Okay.
But you are denying the ability for the government to get evidence against you of a potential crime.
Got it.
And we know as criminal defense lawyers in this country, we should never just give evidence away for free. And certainly Miranda was written for a reason, the Miranda decision, because they were beating confessions out of people.
Right.
And denying people counsel that were begging for counsel. And that still happens in this country, unfortunately. But, the big thing with the driver's license, because you asked about what happens to your driver's license, you're going to lose your driver's license in Missouri if you refuse the official test back at the station.
That's how it is in Arizona.
And we have a statute. They're required to read the implied consent law to you to tell you that you could lose your license. They do not have to tell you have a right to a lawyer. So you have to know on your own, have the education, or just have the wherewithal to say, can I talk to a lawyer, to trigger that 20-minute opportunity I was telling you about earlier? Otherwise, you make this decision on your own and could lose your license for a year in Missouri. And if you blow, for a first-time offender, and then some others, it's a lot of details. Our statutes are very poorly written, but 90-day suspension is your standard if you blow above a .08, and if you refuse, it's a 1-year revocation.
Okay.
And both individuals have an opportunity for driving during that time with an ignition or lock device and the SR22 car insurance.
Yeah, we have something very similar here. Little detailed differences, but nothing dramatically different. How did you get into DUI law specifically? So I tell people all the time that DUI law is really probably, or DUI defense is probably the most complicated type of crime that exists anywhere in the world. I mean, you can have really complicated, money laundering cases, financial types of cases where there's a lot of paperwork.
I would not want to analyze those cases.
No.
I would need a forensic CPA or whatever they're called.
Right. But those are complicated. But
Yeah.
I mean, the general kind of standard, everyday, really complicated crime is DUI because of the science. There's a lot that goes into blood testing and breath testing and physiology of a person's body and all sorts of stuff. How did you get into that field? I know a lot. I personally know a lot of criminal defense lawyers who hate DUI cases. They refuse to take them because of that.
It's very difficult to be a good DWI defense lawyer. The sad part is because a lot of people get DWIs across the socioeconomic spectrum, that you have good lawyers out there and bad lawyers as far as understanding the science and understanding the problems with the breath testing, understanding the problems with the blood testing, understanding the problems with the officers not following their training and just haphazardly arresting people and really not having good, solid proof that anybody was intoxicated. So how I got into it was, like I said, I was a public defender, and I had lots of training on, blood spatter evidence and the hair follicle or the hair testing and the bite marks and all this pseudoscience that the FBI was calling science, and then all of a sudden the experts are coming out and saying, well, the FBI has been wrong for many, many years, and we've been lying about the validity of these tests, and it just looks good on CSI type of stuff, right?
Right.
And the guns and and you hire your experts who teach you how to figure out what's going on. There's a lot of science in some serious violent type cases, your murders and those kinds of cases. So I had all of that training, had all of that understanding, and what I never really found was really good DWI defense training. And it wasn't easy to find. It was national organizations and scientists smattered across the country in different places that would come and help and teach lawyers what we do not know, which is the science.
Right.
We have to learn it. And so I started getting some DWI cases when I went into private practice. And a client would come to me with just a DWI, whereas when I was a public defender, it felt like it was a DWI plus 5 other felonies, and so the DWI didn't even matter at that point.
Right.
And then I got frustrated that I didn't understand what I was doing, and I would look on paper and say, well, you have a bad breath test number on paper. The cop knows how to write a report, whether it's a cut and paste job or a legit good job. They know how to put it on paper and make you look guilty. I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
And I got frustrated. So I started reaching out to people that I thought were really good. And I had 2 really good mentors, one in St. Louis and one in Kansas City, who I would reach out to and say, help. And then one of them in St. Louis started doing training and doing classes. And then I started going to the Missouri Bar and the Missouri Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers DWI seminar. And that's the one I'm now the program chair for.
Yeah.
It took, you start baby steps. You start at the beginning. You say, I know nothing, and you ask for help from a mentor. And you start going to seminars. And then I was going to the National College of DUI Defense, going to a class called metrology.
Yeah.
These are science classes. I took rocks for jocks in college. My last science class was biology in high school.
Yeah.
Like I did not, and I had to dig in and learn.
Yeah.
And then you just constantly are asking the right questions and going to the right seminars. I've spent thousands and thousands of dollars, not to mention hours, learning this stuff and traveling the country. And now I'm teaching at the National College of DUI Defense. I'm on their faculty. I'm on the faculty at the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College, but that's specific to trial skills for all criminal defense and civil plaintiffs lawyers. But knowing the science and digging in and learning it, reading the books and buying some books that some of them are hard to read.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes the science is so tough that once you know what you don't know, or you realize I'm never going to know this completely, well, experts, that's what experts are for.
Right.
So an expert comes in and explains to the jury, because I certainly can't testify and explain to the jury. I just need to have enough information to look at this case and say, we have a problem here. We potentially have an innocent person, or we potentially have a cop who's messing up, and I could win this case. And that's our job. Guilt or innocence isn't supposed to matter. We're supposed to do the best we can for our clients. And that sometimes is fighting to win, even if the person actually was technically guilty of the crime. And so, but oftentimes what I find is there are so many mistakes along the way that who knows if the person was guilty or not? Who knows?
Yeah.
Because nobody did their job right. And that's my job to say, to put a light on that and say, you can't do this to people. You can't pluck people off the street and say they're guilty of a crime unless you do a good job investigating and improving it. So I just start digging in books, classes, worked my way up the food chain until I at least had some amount of knowledge. And frankly, it's the ability to recognize problems, ability to articulate that we have a problem and figure out, how do I put a team together? Because one lawyer can't do it all by themselves. I can't testify. I can't necessarily cross-examine every expert with the same knowledge that expert has, no matter how hard we try.
Right.
You got to bring in experts. So I have an expert who I go to whenever there's a blood test, because she's going to analyze. In fact, she was on Making a Murderer.
Oh,
She's
really?
out of New Mexico. She's the quality control inspector, essentially. She's the one who, if I send everything from the lab to, she says, what? She's told me that the Missouri State Highway Patrol crime lab was one of the worst she'd ever seen because of their inability to follow protocol and to make sure that there's good reliability with their blood testing for alcohol and for drugs, and the integrity of those blood samples from the moment it's drawn out of the person's arm. From that moment forward, the phlebotomist who pulls the blood out, who gives it to the officer, and then what the officer does with it, and if it's not refrigerated properly. And there are so many opportunities for that blood to be messed with to where it's fermenting or something's going wrong. And fermenting obviously means it's growing alcohol in it, because it takes blood, or it takes glucose and oh my God, my mind just went blank on the process of fermentation.
The idea just being that you've got basically the same process that you turn grapes into wine is happening in your blood in these vials, because they're not putting in proper preservatives or anticoagulants. Or
just last year, the company that puts the preservatives in the tubes had to publicly announce that, oops, we messed up. Our quality control messed up, and we sent out tubes without the proper preservatives.
Right.
How many thousands of blood tests across the country?
We got hit with that. Yeah, we started seeing all these recalls. They're, these batches are bad. These vials are bad, and that's a pretty catastrophic problem. Yeah. But I want to, you made it sound actually fairly simple. All the work that you've put into this, you made it say, well, I've worked over, hard for all these years, and now I'm a faculty and all that stuff. I just want to, kind of reiterate how impressive that is, because you're balancing a number of different kind of talents. Number one is the science, which is amazing. The fact
I'm not saying I have the science all in my head.
Well, no, but but you've got enough of it that you're effective with it.
I think too much science can hurt a lawyer. I mean, you need to know the science, but then you also need to know how to share it. Have you ever put an expert on the stand who is so brilliant, and they can write a brilliant book, write a brilliant paper? It's like going to college or going to high school, and you have a teacher who's the smartest person in the building, but they can't teach because they can't speak at your level.
Right.
That, to me, is where I need to put my energy and my talents in teaching other lawyers. Learn all this stuff, and then back up and talk to a jury or talk to a judge like a human being at the level they're on. I would say, talk to me like I'm a third grader, because I don't know. Like, don't even use the word fermentation without telling me what it means, because And I'm going to treat other people the same way.
Well, that was you beat me to it, but that was my segue. I mean, you have that science, you have that skill set, you've got a lot of experience as a trial lawyer, meaning you're actually going into court and doing trials. Just because you're a criminal defense lawyer doesn't necessarily mean you're a litigator. I mean,
right. There's plenty that have never gone to trial.
I knew a guy who was a public defender for 7 years. He had a contract with one of our local cities around here, and he was bragging that he had never done a jury trial in those 7 years. And I'm like thinking,
how is that bragging? I would be embarrassed.
I would be embarrassed too. And I was
to
thinking,
be a criminal defense lawyer who's never had a jury trial.
I was thinking, dude,
that's pathetic.
That almost sounds like, close to it's not technical malpractice, but maybe you could probably go through your cases over the last 7 years. I can't believe he had a contract and stuff. But my point is that litigating, having the courage and being able to go in and present in front of a jury, it's still, it causes anxiety. It's a lot of work. You have to block out everything for a certain period of time. It's like preparing for a boxing match or something.
Your whole life is on hold.
Yeah. And everything changes. You're sleeping. You're thinking about this in your dreams. You're waking up thinking about it. You're going to sleep thinking about it.
Yes.
Relationships are taxed. Everything's taxed because you're getting prepared to go into this
brawl.
To battle. Yeah. Like going into the Colosseum like a Roman gladiator. But so you've got that skill set.
And you have to focus.
You've got the ability to at least interpret and understand the science. But the real kind of magic is when you combine those two and you're able to translate it in a way that a jury understands, because that's what you were talking about. You could have these experts, you could have a lawyer who knows the science, and you two can have a conversation in a courtroom where you're talking to the expert, he's talking back to you, but the jury is just glazed over. They have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
I think my gift is that I don't have too much knowledge, and I'm not trying to impress with my knowledge, because the minute you get a lawyer who starts to impress with their knowledge and they have they're speaking at this level, everybody's eyes are glazing over.
Right.
And you can't do that to a judge or a jury.
Yeah.
And if you do, you're missing the boat. Like I'm looking at my jury and I'm looking at my judge and making sure everyone's understanding what's going on at all times.
Yeah.
I'm testing the temperature of the room at all times. And if you don't know how to do that, get out of the courtroom and get to a class and learn how to talk to people.
Yeah.
Whether it be a Toastmasters or a public speaking, there's tons of stuff out there now all over social media. Coaches, speaking from the stage, all that stuff.
Right.
Learn or get out of the courtroom and find your strength is the biggest gift I ever had from a very young age. I don't even remember who told me this or how I learned this, but it was find your gift and go with it and quit fighting your weaknesses. Quit trying to make your weaknesses a strength. Why?
Right.
Why?
Or be somebody that you may want to look like, or they look attractive to you, and you go, I want to be that person. But you're not that person.
Right.
You don't have that skill set. You have different skills. So use those.
Long time ago, I figured out my skill set is not appellate work. My skill set is not I don't even want to write a motion or argue a motion for, I don't even like the work behind the legal stuff there.
Right.
I'm not the constitutional law expert. I know enough to know, okay, we have an issue here. We have an issue with the stop. We have an issue with the search. We have an issue with something. I can issue spot. Like most lawyers who went to law school, we can issue spot.
Sure.
But if it's not your strength, outsource it. Hire someone else. That's what I do now. Because there are people who that's their strength, and they should not be taking on a case and doing the trial work. We work as teams because while one person's strength is in the courtroom, the other person's strength's behind the scenes. It's not my strength to read, like in civil cases. I've gotten involved in civil cases recently where there's thousands and thousands of pages and depositions. We get depositions in criminal cases too, but the depositions in civil cases are much longer.
Yeah.
And you have thousands of pages of paperwork to read, and then you've got interrogatories we don't have in criminal, and you have requests for admissions and requests for documents, and if you're suing a corporation, they dump a lot of paperwork on you. That's also not my strength. I want other people to sift through it, organize it. My strength is figuring out we need to have a chronology, we need to have a timeline, we need to understand the story, then we need to articulate the story in a way that people go, oh, that's what happened here.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I see it now, right? And it's the power of persuasion and the power of storytelling. And figuring out the story is another strength that I have, but it's not from perusing thousands of pages of documents. That's not my strength. That takes a meticulous mind, like a CPA or an engineer type of mind, and that's not my mind.
Yeah, yeah, and you've just recently kind of taken that skill set and you've applied it to a civil case.
Yes.
Right. So I wanted to ask you about that. If you can kind of share what that involved, what that looked like.
Many years ago, a friend of mine had a situation at work where she felt she was being discriminated against, and she came to my law firm, but it was not an area of law that I handled. So my law firm sent her to a colleague that did handle that. But the case kind of stayed with the firm in the sense that I stayed with her and her 6 friends she brought with her from work. And we sued AT&T for all 7 of those people. And I stayed involved along the way, but I did not do like the depositions. I did not read the thousands of pages of discovery. And one of those cases went to trial in December. And that was where I realized I love even civil jury trials, not just criminal defense trials. I had so much fun in that trial. And my colleague that did it with me, his name's Kevin, that's his area of expertise, is that area of law, employment discrimination. It was an age discrimination, reverse race discrimination case, and a retaliation was a part of it too. And that's his area of expertise. So I literally said to him, I want to do as much in this trial as you want to give me. I like to try cases. He didn't know. He knew I'm on the faculty of the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College and that I teach other lawyers how to try cases and how to talk to juries and how to win. Mm-hmm. He did not know. He had never seen me in court before. And so he trusted me, and we practiced my opening before because I wanted to not screw up, because there are rules that I don't know in the civil context that I needed to make sure I was following. And so we practiced my opening, and then I did several direct examinations. I did several cross-examinations, including a psychiatrist who was testifying for the defense. And at the end of it, and we were having so much fun. It was a 2-week trial. We were having so much fun. At the end of it, he said to me, "You're one of the best jury trial lawyers I've ever seen in the employment discrimination world." I'm like, what? It was such a boost, a confidence boost, and such a wonderful thing to hear from someone who does it for a living and is very good at it and has had the $20 million verdict, And we got the biggest verdict in my county in that type of law that county had ever seen. And we're getting ready to go to jury trial again in April. And now I've got the bug. Now it's not just criminal defense. I want to do more civil work. I want to help other lawyers. Like literally, I think my future is that I'm going to put myself out there as a consultant. Yeah. And let people hire me to help them put together their case and try their case, whether it be pay me by the hour, pay me a percentage, if it's a contingency case. I haven't figured all that out yet, but I love helping lawyers try cases. There are plenty of lawyers who don't know how, or they're too scared, or they're new and they've never done it before. And as long as they know the law and they do all the paperwork, I'm willing to do the jury trial.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's great. Lawyers kind of have a tendency to not want to ask for help, in my experience. I mean, sometimes they do. There are listservs and things like that where they can be helpful, but a lot of attorneys, like it's an ego thing. It
is an ego thing.
I should just go be able to plow through this trial, which is a stupid thing to do.
I have been a mentor to so many lawyers who call me and ask for help all the time. I can't, and I've asked for help, so it's always a pay it forward mentality. And plus, if you let your ego get in the way and you're afraid to admit you're not good at something, shame on you.
Right.
And that poor client.
Right.
Oh,
right.
That poor client.
Right.
Quit selling what you don't have. Admit your strengths and admit your weaknesses and put together a team and get a mentor. Somehow put it together. Yeah. And create a force to be reckoned with once you do that.
Yeah. It's not your life, it's somebody else's life,
right?
And so your incompetencies are going to, because you're too afraid to go ask for help, are going to impact that person, not you.
I'm not the only lawyer out there who is willing to help others. I think especially the newer ones, if you're within 10 years of graduating law school, or if you're about to go to a jury trial, or you even have one a year from now and you've never had a jury trial, immediately start getting some training and getting some help. It doesn't have to be you. Open your eyes to the opportunity that there are other lawyers out there that might do it for you,
right,
and teach you along the way.
Right. Yeah, I've had those experiences. When I was a new lawyer, I was asking everybody for help, and there are certain situations where you can just say, "Hey, I have this issue. I have no idea what to do," and a person just goes, "Oh, obviously it's this case right here. I've done it 50 times." and that's it.
I wouldn't have learned DWI defense had I
Yeah.
not reached out and people said, I'm willing to help. That's how we all learn.
Yeah. What about this next kind of phase? So, I know you're talking about, being a consultant and that type of stuff. Is that in the near future, in the far future?
I hope it's in the near future
Yeah.
because I'm loving it so much. If I could go to jury trial 6 times a year on my own case, on someone else's case, in the civil arena, not even to mention the criminal stuff, I think that would actually, I think it's my joy. I think it's my purpose. I think it's
Yeah.
where I need to be because I enjoy it so much. It doesn't feel like we have these business coaches that I have a business coach and they ask you what gets you up in the morning. If you don't know the answer to that question or you're struggling with it, what gets you up in the morning, what gets you excited to go to work, and if you're having those days, you need to just open your eyes, take a moment, figure it out. And that's what happened to me recently because of this jury trial.
Yeah.
I was hitting kind of that burnout,
Yeah.
hitting the brick wall, the same thing over and over and over, it felt like. And all of a sudden I had this thing that I'm like, oh my God, I love this. This
Right.
could be my future. And so I feel like it's in my near future. I've already decided on a website name. It's going to be KimBenjaminTrialLawyer.com.
Love it.
Got to get the website going, got to
Yeah.
get my business plan in place so I know what it is I want to sell and how I want to sell it. As far as if I'm selling me and my time, I got to figure that out on paper. How am I going to do that? Because my time is valuable. So I'm going to have to find other people to do other things for me at the DWI, the Missouri DWI and Criminal Law Center at the Benjamin Law Firm. That business, I have lawyers, I have support staff, so there's a lot of stuff that gets done already, but I might have to leave some of my roles there, especially when it comes to like the management of the team. I like to try the cases. I like to be in the courtroom helping the clients.
You like the action, baby.
I like the action, and I don't like, I have to say, going in front of a judge to say, Judge, we need a continuance is the thing that makes me go, I don't want to get up for that in the morning.
Yeah.
I want to be the one that says, ready for trial, let's go. That's the day I love getting up for court.
Did you feel like the civil trial, it's a totally different standard than criminal?
I
So-
was prosecuting the bad guy, and
Yeah.
that felt so good because
Yeah.
AT&T in my eyes had done some things shady to these employees, and they weren't owning up to it. And when you have someone you're going up against and you're saying, shame on you.
Yeah.
You didn't have to do that. And because you did it, all you had to do was apologize and we wouldn't be here.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that felt good.
Yeah, because it's different. It's like, in criminal law, the jury and the judge and everybody just presumes your client's guilty, even though that's not the standard. It's not how the law works. They just do. It's just kind of seared into their brains. But in a civil case, it's up in the air, right? I mean, it's a lot more.
I'm prosecuting the bad guy. It's
Yeah.
the way it feels, and it feels good. And I have to say, as a criminal defense lawyer, a good criminal defense lawyer is never defending.
Right.
A good criminal defense lawyer is on the offense. And I learned that many years ago at the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College.
Yeah.
Jerry specifically taught me that. I remember we're in the big barn, and everybody's there, and he's talking about criminal defense lawyers quit defending. You are on the offense. You are prosecuting a corrupt system. You're prosecuting bad investigation. You're prosecuting maybe a bad prosecutor or bad cops, or maybe there's snitches and there's liars and maybe it's a false accusation. Like, you have to figure out what you're prosecuting as a defense attorney.
Yeah.
And that's where I actually found some joy again in the criminal defense, because when you're just defending and you feel like the world's against you and the thousands of law enforcement and the prosecutors and even the judges against you, everybody's against you and the public's against you and everybody's against you, that is not a good feeling.
No.
And it's not a good place to be.
No, and I explain that to people too. You walk into that courtroom, you're on your own completely. The only person who's on your side is the defense attorney.
Yeah.
The jurors are typically against you. The bailiff doesn't like you. The judge doesn't like you. The team of prosecutors doesn't. The multiple police officers, the detective. You're alone. You're flying solo, which is why you need somebody like you or like our office to stand there and act as a shield to protect them, because it's not a fair fight.
And it's not just a shield.
Yeah.
Lady Justice has a sword in her
got a
hand,
sword too.
and we have to come out fighting.
I love it.
And if, like I said, if you're on the defense, you're losing.
Yeah.
You've got to go on the offense.
Yeah, that's a great mindset shift that I think would serve a lot of defense attorneys if they just change the paradigm a little bit.
I look at every case of course, it starts with paper, and then you get the videos. And you had
Yeah.
asked earlier about the videos and how they help. 90% of the time, it's because the paper says this happened, but the video says this happened. And
I know.
somebody's lying, and it's usually the officer in that situation, but or at least not reporting correctly.
Right.
You know, they're not always lying. Sometimes they're just.
Yeah, they make mistakes too. Like we said, we're not trying to rub their noses in simple mistakes. It's when it becomes.
And sometimes they're spinning it
they're spinning it
to make their case,
and they're fibbing it, and it's a simple mistake that turns into a cover-up type of situation where
it snowballs.
They're being less more dishonest than honest, and that is where I really have a problem with it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that a defense can do with that.
Yes.
So all right, well, anything else? We covered a lot.
I know we did.
Anything else? I know you gave the website. What about your current law firm? Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more, if they want to come, hear you speak or teach or something like that? What are the best places for them to reach out?
The website is the DWIcriminallawcenter.com. So that's the best way to find me and to find the firm if anyone were looking for that. But if they're looking for, like, let's say it's a lawyer listening and they're wondering, how do I get the training? Like, I want to get some of what Kim got and what Kim and Rob are talking about, and that passion again. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they're a new lawyer. I would start with the Jerry Spence Trial Lawyers College website.
Jerry
It's trial.
Spence.
Yeah, Jerry Spence is one of the famous trial lawyers he is in my world, my mind, the best trial lawyer in the history of America.
Wow.
He has written amazing books. He's still alive. He's still writing. But his trial lawyers college, he created 4 lawyers to train lawyers is in Wyoming. So just go to the website. We have regionals all across the country. I'm actually in charge of the regional in Kansas City at the end of March. So if someone hears this soon enough, get on the website, sign up. We still have a few spots left. Get to Kansas City, and we'll show you a good time, and we'll teach you how to be a trial lawyer. But I would figure out what you want to do first. Don't just assume you want to be a trial lawyer. You really do have to figure out what you want to do. What gets you up in the morning? What is your joy? What do you enjoy doing? And then go for that. And I would start with, for me anyway, it was the Trial Lawyers College. I went in 2000. A long time ago at this point.
Yeah.
And I joined the faculty, I think it was 2008. And it's what actually made me a better trial lawyer and a better person. We do a lot of work at that program that's not just for being a better lawyer, it's for being a better person. So.
Yeah. I actually will check that out because that sounds pretty great.
I'd love for you to come.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Kim Benjamin. So a couple quick places to connect: DWIcriminallawcenter.com. info@benjaminlawkc.com. Your phone number is 816-322-8008. Of course, you're on everywhere else people need to find you: Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Kim Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on the show. I had a great time speaking with you.
Thank you, Rob. Me too.